Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another quick Flutter tutorial. In this one, I'm going to show you how we can code a functioning habit tracker using Flutter. In the first section, I'll show you how we can create this nice simple looking UI. And then in the second half, I'll show you how we can create the functionality for the app. Now, just before we start, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, which is Rotato. I'm sure you have all seen in all of my intros, I love using Rotato to showcase my work. I'll link it below, so make sure to check them out. So I've opened up a brand new Flutter project, and just to keep everyone on the same page, in my main function, I'm running my app, which brings us to this home page. And this is just a stateful widget returning a blank scaffold. So you should have a white blank app like this. Now let's begin coding the UI for our habit tracker. Now, just starting with the app bar, I want to create a sort of dark bar at the top. So let's say like gray with a strength of 900. And for the title, let's put in some nice little message here. Let's say consistency is key, since this is a habit tracker. And it's centered, but I actually want to not center this. Yep, I want it on the side like that. And also the background color of the entire scaffold, I want to go for a gray but a strength of 300. Yep, so I don't like having a completely white background. We'll just make it slightly gray. And if we go to the body, let's start by creating a column. And in the column, we essentially just want to have a list of habit tiles. So let's just create this real quick. So for example, let's just create a container. And in the child of this container, let's create a row of objects. And at the beginning, I just want to have a text widget saying, let's just give an example habit for now and see how this looks. And let's also bring in an icon. And the color of this container, let's say it's gray, but a strength of 200. So slightly lighter than what we had. Cool, so it looks like we have our habit tile there. Now I want to wrap this container in a padding. And let's say like 20. Cool, and even the container itself, we can control the padding for the objects inside. And so let's do like 20 as well. Cool, here it is. And if you can see properly, the corners are very sharp, which if you've seen any of my designs, I like to make the corners a bit round. So let's specify some decoration. And if you want to specify some decoration, then we're going to have to bring the color inside the decoration. And the main thing I want to do here is the border radius. And I want to change this to, let's see what 12 looks like. Cool, so you can see it's a little curved in the corners. Let's see, maybe just change this to 100. And just while we are working on this, I want to have more of these habit tiles below it. And so this is my home page, right? Which means I want to encapsulate this code so that we can reuse it and make our code look much more simpler. So what do I mean by that? Let's grab this little container we just created. And I'm going to create a new folder called utilities. And in this folder, I like to just create the little objects for our UI. So I'm going to call this habit tile, which is a stateless widget called habit tile. And inside, let's return what we created earlier, which means if I come back to the home page, I can just start typing habit tile, and you can see it says auto import. So press tab. And this is really useful because using some object-oriented programming, we can create a bunch of these habit tiles like this. Cool. Now, one thing just I notice is if you look at our padding, we put 20 around each of these habit tiles, right? So in between here, there's actually 40, and I don't want that to happen because there's 20 and 20, right? So instead of just putting a padding of 20 all around the habit tile, I'm going to say only. And I want it on the left, I want it on the right, and I also want it on the top. So if you save this way it'll all just space out evenly like this. So far so good. Now, just to clean this up a little bit, I want, let's say, the main axis alignment space between. Cool. I want that gear settings icon to be at the very end. And just looking at the left-hand side of this, I want to have a couple things. So, for example, let's grab this text widget and create a column. And so at the beginning, we want the habit name, and below it, I want the progress. So for example, let's say like right now we've done 2 minutes outside of a total of 10 minutes. And this is 20%. Cool. So for my habit tracker, I want to not only have the habit name, but I also want to know the amount of progress. Okay, so I want the user to be able to hit this tile and we can actually count the seconds until we fill up the goal time. So for this portion of the tutorial is just the UI. So let's clean this up and make this a little bit more prettier. So first of all, the cross-axis alignment on this column, I want to make it start. So you can see the way this is aligned. I want it to be cross-axis aligned to the beginning. And also, let's change up the style of the habit name. So first of all, I want this to be bold. And let's change up the size as well. So the font size is 14 by default. Let's say 20. Cool. And maybe 18 actually. And if I just copy this, actually, let's just create a new style, because the style for this guy is going to be a little bit different. First thing is I'm going to change the color to be gray. Yeah, I kind of want to gray it out so you can sort of faintly just see it in the background. And let's just kind of create a bit of space between them. Or too much. Yeah, something like this. Cool. And finally, just at the beginning, I want to bring in a percent indicator. So like a circular progress bar kind of thing. So I am going to go to my pubspec.yaml and just bring in a dependency called percent indicator, which I've made a separate tutorial if you need. So check it out because I use this a lot. It's actually really useful. So check that out if you need, but save this file and let's close this. And I can show you real quick how we can use the percent indicator. So before the habit names, let's have a progress circle. And so let's start typing circular percent indicator. That's the one that we want. And the radius, let's just give it some random radius. Cool, so here it is. And if you look here, you can see there's a percent. So if I say like 0.7, you can see 70% of it is going to be filled up, right? So we're going to use this later on in the kind of more functionality part of the tutorial. So basically what I want is I want the user to be able to click this and start the timer until we finish it. Okay, so the user can start and stop the habit. So this one we'll focus on a little bit later on. Now, one thing is we have this overall row and we use the space between. So that's why we have space between here. But I actually want these two to be grouped together. Okay, so let's just grab this part without the icon and put it in its own row. And what this does is if you save it, you can see like these are two stuck together and then you got the icon at the end, so that if I space between, there's only two objects to space between. Okay, so I kind of just grouped this one together. And then we can use some sized box here to space this out. Maybe 20. Now this is looking really good so far. We want to create a lot of these habit tiles, and obviously I don't want all of them to be exercise. So let's try to fix the fixed string part of this. So we're going to need to create some variables up here that we can pass through. So from habit to habit, let's think about what's going to change. The first thing is the habit name is what I'm going to need. Okay, and let's just start with that. So this dot habit name, and let's require it. So we can replace exercise with the habit name. So what did we just do? If we come back to our home page, you can see the habit tile, it's kind of got a red squiggle now because we can give it a habit name. So first one, let's just call it exercise. And then now we can create a few more of these and change it to read, meditate, and code. Okay, so this is how we use some basic object-oriented programming to create this UI. Cool, now one last thing I want to do is the play button. So inside here, I want to create a play button. And I want it right in the middle. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a container of height 60 and width 60. And let's just give it a color just so I can see where this is. Okay, here it is. And so in there, I want to create a child, but I want to have a stack of children. So if you're not sure about stacks, you can go check out my separate tutorial that I made just dedicating on how to use a stack. But I can quickly explain it for you here. A stack is, as the name suggests, it just stacks different widgets on top of each other. So for example, I want to have the circular progress indicator. And so if I just save this, you can see it's there right now. And one thing you can do is change this radius to be 60. Yep, this radius is the same as this. So it fills it up perfectly. And then let's have a play pause button. So I'm gonna have an icon. For now, let's just say play, arrow. And you can see if I just save this, it'll just all be at the very beginning of the container, which is not what I want. So you can and now we can get rid of this red color. Whoops. Sweet, so I just did a stack so that I can put this play button kind of on top of this circular percent indicator. Sweet, now I think the UI for our app is looking pretty good so far. So let's change our attention to the functionality aspect of this habit tracker. So for example, I want to be able to click this and change it to a pause button and a play button, right? I want to just switch between the two. And I want this settings gear to be clickable as well. And also some of these numbers like the current time spent and the goal time, as well as the percentage. So each of these things, let's make it more functional. So right now we have the habit name, right, which changes between each habit. So let's create some more things here. So the first thing is a void callback, just called onTap. And a void callback is just a type for the gesture detector. So we have this. We also have another void callback for the settings gear being tapped. Okay, so this on tap is for the play button. This settings tap is for this gear button. And some more integers. So let's have one for the time spent, right? So how much of the habit have we actually completed? Also, what is the goal time? Let's call it time goal. So each habit should have a different time goal, right? Some people want 10 minutes for exercise, and maybe for coding, I want like 2 hours, things like that. And finally, I think I need one more. Yep, I need a boolean to see if the habit has started. Okay, just to keep track of if we should display a play button or a pause button. So let's create the constructors for this. And let's require it. Cool, and now that we have these variables, let's pass it through. So first of all, it's this circle. If you come to our stack here, let's wrap this in a gesture detector. And by the way, this this container, I'm only using it for the height and the width and not for any colors. So in this case, you can just use a sized box. And so let's wrap this with a gesture detector. And if we tap this, then let's just pass through the onTap method. Okay, so this part is if we tap this section. And the other thing is the gear. I want to change this as well to make it a gesture detector. And on tap for this one, we want to pass the settings tapped function. Cool. And what else did we have? The time spent and the time goal. So that's this here. So it looks like we just fixed it as a string. So what I'm going to do, right, is say the time spent. Let's change it to a string. And this isn't a constant anymore. And let's say like a slash button, and then outside of the time goal to string. Sweet. And the last thing is the boolean. So we have this habit started boolean just to know if we should display a play button or a pause button. So where is our icon? Here. So you can see inside, right? We're displaying a play arrow, but let's say habit started question mark. So depending on if my habit started, if it has started, then let's display a pause button. Otherwise, we're going to display a play button. So let's see if this works. I'm going to go back to my home page and we should have a lot of red squiggles because we have to specify these things, right? So let's say on tap, we haven't created this method yet. So let's just put in a blank bit of code. Same thing for this. We'll fill this out a bit later. And let's see if these things work. So time spent is an integer. Let's put in a random number here. Let's say 4. And the goal time, let's say 12 minutes. And the habit started, let's say true. So I just want to get rid of these for now. And cool, here it is. So you can see like, because I said habit started is true, this is a pause button. Whereas if I say this is false, it'll change to a play button. So this is what we can use to control the Boolean. And you can see our time spent over the time goal. Cool, so things are looking pretty good. Now we want to create a few more of these ones, right? And I don't want to have to individually specify everything. So let's try to think of a good data structure to use here. So I'm going to come up to the top and I'm going to create an overall habit list. Or let's say like habit summary. So I'm going to have a list of a bunch of things in here. So let's say I'm going to call it habit list. And just so we know what's going on, right? Basically what I want in this list is I first want the habit name. And then I want the habit started. And then I want the time spent, the time goal, and I think that should do. Right? So what do I mean by this? Let's say I'm going to create a habit, right? And this one is going to be called exercise. And has the habit started? By default, it should all be false. And the time spent, let's say 0 seconds. By the way, we should also be more clear here. So time spent, I'm going to say in seconds. And for the time goal, I'm going to say in min. So we've spent 0 seconds so far with a total of 10 minutes. Okay, so I can create more of these. And let's change this to read, meditate, and code. Cool, so using these numbers, right? Like I could change this to 20, change that to 20, change this to 40. And so now that we have it all collected in a nice habit list, we can come down here and I can give it, for example, like habit list 0, 0. And if you're not quite sure about how lists work, I can quickly explain it for you. You can see like habit list 0, this first 0 is this 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so when I say habit list 0, I'm looking at this one. And then within this list, it's another 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so when I say habit list 0, 0, we're looking at this first one. And then from that list, we're looking at the first object here, which is the habit name. Okay, so that's what I'm doing here. And so with this, we can actually keep creating more and more, right? But one good way to do this is to get rid of all this, and we're going to use a list view builder. And again, I made a separate tutorial for list view builders. So if you want a more in-depth understanding of it, make sure to check out the tutorial. But I can show you real quick how it works. So let's say list view builder, and we're going to return a habit tile. And for the list view, we have to specify how many items we're going to build. So we could say we want 3 or 4 or 5, but a good bit of code is just to say habit list dot length. Okay, so just however many habits we have. And then now, if you look at this index is going to go from 0 until however many habits we have. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3. So for the habit name, we can say habit list index 0. Okay, like I said, this index is going to cycle through, and this first 0 is going to give us the name, right? And then for the onTap, again, we haven't created this, so let's create this now. I'm going to say void habit started, and I'm going to need to know which habit we're looking at. Okay, so if I tap on this habit tile, if I tap this, then let's start this habit. But we need to know the index, which we can pass through. Okay, so let's start the habit, and we're going to execute this a bit later on. And same thing for the settings as well. I'm going to say settings opened. And the time spent, so that's going to be 0, 1, 2. That's all of the 2s, right? So I'm going to say habit list index 2, habit list index 3. And this habit started, let's actually put it before this, just so it looks nice, because this is going to be habit list index 1. Cool, so hopefully that's making some clear sense, right? 1, 2, 3, and 0 is just 0, 1, 2, and 3. So have a look at it and just let me know if you have any questions about this one. But I think it's looking pretty good so far. And so if I save this, you can see it automatically creates 4 of them just based on this habit list that I created. So conveniently, now I could just go up to here and say like writing, and it will all change. Okay, so this is a nice data structure for us to use. Cool, so now that everything is set up, let's slowly work our way through the functionality. So the first one being, I want to tap this play button and begin the habit, right? So this is our habit tile, and if I hit on tap, we're going to call this method, and we're going to pass through the index, meaning which habit are we looking at right now. So in the habit started, let's set the state, and let's say habit list index 1 is equal to the opposite of what it is currently. Right, so the habit list and the index tells us which habit we're looking at. And then the 1 tells us the status of if our habit has started or not, which it should be false by default. And so if I just save this, right? Yeah, so you can see I can now click and these icons will change. Sweet. This settings gear, let's say we're going to show a dialog for this one. And we're going to show an alert dialog. which I'm going to remind everyone I did also make a separate tutorial for these alert dialogues, so check it out if you need, but I can show you real quick how to use it. So let's just say, like in the title, for now I'm just going to say settings for okay, so let's see if this works. Yep, here we go. So we can click on each one and it's like settings for the read. So later in this page, like on this alert dialog, I want to be able to allow the user to change the name of the habit and also the goal time. Sweet. Now let's try to get this timer to actually work. So we can pause play this, but when we play it, I want the time spent to increment upwards. Okay, so I want the time to actually begin. So we're going to go to the habit started, because that's when we click this play button. We're going to call this habit started method. And right now, all we're doing is just flipping the active status on and off, which we should probably comment here. And now what you want to do is keep the time going. So I want to show you the first approach I took to get the time going, and I'll show you the problem with this particular approach, and then I'll show you the better way to go about this. So to keep the time going, I'm going to create a timer, and we're going to import this library. So I've used timers many times in my videos, but basically we can set the duration to be 1 second. And so every 1 second we can execute something. So every 1 second, how about we increment the time, which is this number here. So let's say habit list index number 2 is the time spent, and let's just increment this. So if I save this one, yep, you can see I played it and the time spent is going upwards by 1. And so this is what I did originally, and I thought it was the easiest way to do it. But I ran into an issue, which is I was testing this on my physical device, and I noticed that when the phone is locked, like when it's asleep, it doesn't actually run, like the app doesn't run in the background. And so the problem with that is sometimes when you're doing like a particular habit, let's say I'm going for a run and I hit this play button, then I don't want to have to leave the phone on all the time, right? Like I want to start the habit and then turn my phone off and I want to go for a run. And I want the timer to continue running in the background. So how do we solve this problem? I mean, coding is all about solving problems, right? And this is a big problem where my app doesn't run when the phone is locked, and that's a big deal for this app. So let's come up with a different solution. So the approach I'm going to take to fix this problem is to use a timer that never stops, whether the app is closed or not. And that is to reference what the actual time is right now. So like for example, let's say if we start the habit, so if I click this, then let's grab the current time. Note what the start time is. So I'm going to call this start time, and we can say date time dot now. Or do I not need that? Yep. So this will tell you what the time is right now. And just to show you, let's just print it out. And let's get rid of this code. So if I save this and I hit that, you can see the time that it tells you, the date, the year 2022, July 5th, and it tells you the hour, minute, and second. And then once I hit this pause button again, it'll tell you when I stopped. So I'm just going to get the difference between these two times to calculate the time elapsed. Cool, so coming back to our code, when we start the habit, let's grab the current time. And you can actually grab, I think you can say, like the second. You can know what the exact second is. And so now that that's stored in a variable, later, when we start this timer, we should check when the user has stopped the timer. So if habit list 1, which is these values, this is false. Or I guess I could just say, if this is not true, then timer.cancel. Okay, so otherwise the timer is just going to keep going even though we don't need it to be going. So just check when the user has stopped the habit. And now for the important part, let's calculate the time elapsed by comparing current time and start time. So I'm going to put in another variable called current time. And then we can change the time elapsed, which is number 2, these ones. I'm going to change this and say it is current time dot seconds subtracting the start time dot seconds. So there's still more modifications we need to make to this code, but just looking at the seconds, let's see if this works. And I forgot to set the state. Let's grab all this and just set the state. Cool, and if I press play, you can see the time is incrementing. And all this is doing in the code is it's just comparing the current time to the start time. So it doesn't matter if our phone is locked and asleep, as soon as the app starts again, then it'll just calculate whatever this number is, and so the timer will always work. Now you can see that there's an issue, like why is there a negative number? Well, that's because the time, as you guys know, like we could go from, I'm just going to type some things here. Like the start time, it could be like 12 minutes, or let's say like it's 6:30. And the current time is 6:30 as well. And let's say it's 20 seconds to 45 seconds. So let's say it's 6:30 minutes and 20 seconds. And in the current time, let's say it's also 6:30 and then 45 seconds. So obviously if I just subtract the current time and the start time in terms of the seconds, this will be a nice 25 seconds, right? But it's a problem when, let's say, the time goes a bit further, and let's say our start time is just this, but then we go a minute later, 10 seconds. So clearly this is still after this time, but just because of how time works, the minute is now an extra minute than this one, and so the seconds is a number that's less than that. So if I calculate this, it'll be minus 10 seconds. And so that's why sometimes we'll see positive numbers and negative numbers, which is fine. We just got to take into consideration the minutes as well. So the way to do this is, I'm just going to do a bit of math here and say, all right, current time in the minute, subtract the start time in the minute, and we're going to multiply this by 60. Okay, so I still have the seconds being subtracted, but I also have this minutes being subtracted as well. And we're going to multiply by 60 to convert everything into seconds. So hopefully you're following along with this sort of math. But if not, just let me know below. I'm sure I can help, or a lot of other people can help. Cool, so yeah, you're never going to get a negative number like this. Cool, and just to continue this pattern on, I'm going to do the same thing for hours. So say like 60 times 60 to convert everything into seconds. And just do the hours as well. Here we're changing if the habit has start or stopped. So I'm just going to wrap this timer in an if statement. And I only want to start this timer if this is true. Okay, so if the habit is active, then we're going to start the timer. Otherwise, there's no need to. And by the way, this bit of code is redundant. So this will just check, is this true or false? And so if I just save this, let's just test our timer. So it goes to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it looks like it's working pretty good. And let's see if we stop it. Cool, it stops as well. Now there's going to be an issue if I start again. Cool, it just goes back to 0, 1, 2. So the reason why it's doing this is because we have to take into account the elapsed time, like the time that's already elapsed in the previous sort of session, right? Because this is only calculating the start time and the current time for each time the user presses it. So if you look at this variable, so the habit index number 2, that's the time spent, right? And so what we need to do is at the beginning of a new session, quote unquote, we need to include the time that's already elapsed. Okay, so for example, let's say elapsed time is habit list number 2, right? So currently it's 0, but later, like for the first time we play this, and let's say we stop it at 3 or 4, then this number would have updated to 4, right? And so the next time we click this, let's just store that number, in this case 4, into this variable. Okay, and what we're going to do with this variable is just add it to our new calculation. So let's see if this works. Just bring this back to 0 and I'm going to save it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so it stops at 6, and hopefully if I press it again, it will just continue going up. 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on. Okay, good stuff, good stuff. Sweet, we're making some good ass progress. Now, one thing is, for the time spent, I did it all in seconds, but it's easy to calculate. But now if you look at this, if you go above 60 seconds, it'll just still remain in seconds. So let's try to do some work to convert this to minutes, so it's a little bit more nicer to look at. So we're gonna go to our habit tile, and this time spent is in seconds. So let's just stop this timer. I'm gonna go to, where did we put it? Time spent, right? So I want to change this to a min and second format. So let's create a method here, convert seconds into min and seconds. So for example, like 62 seconds should be 1 minute and 02. It should be like this. So I want to convert from seconds to minutes like that. So let's say I'm gonna just use it as a string because we want to display it as a string here anyway. And let's say convert to min sec format. Or let's just say format to min sec. And we're going to get the seconds, total seconds to be more exact. And so if we're given this integer, like 62, how are we going to convert it? So what you want to do here is grab the total seconds, and we just want the remainder if we divide by 60. So let's change this to a string. So if you don't know what this percent sign does, it's called modulus or moduli. Basically, if I divide total seconds by 60, it'll tell us the remainder. Like for example, 62 moduli 60, this will equal just 2. It just tells us the remainder. And the other thing is I want to know the minutes. Now for the minutes, let's just say total seconds divided by 60. Right? And I don't want any decimals. I just want to know how many minutes go into these total seconds. How many whole minutes to be exact. So we can say like to string as fixed 1. And what this one does to string as fixed 1, it tells us, you can read it here, but it basically rounds the number to a fixed decimal place. So you can see here like 1, if you convert it to a string as fixed with a 3, it'll tell you in terms of 3 decimal places. Now, one problem with this is, say 59 seconds. I want to convert this to 0.59, right? But if I say like 59 seconds and I do this bit of code divided by 60, and then I put the string as fixed, this will tell me like 0.9 something. And you could ask like, why don't I just say fixed 0, meaning I don't want a decimal place? Well, the problem with this is because it's rounding. If I had this situation like this, 59 over 60, and I convert it to a string to 0 decimal place, this will round it to 1 because it was like 0.9 something. And so I don't want the completely rounded one. I'm just interested in how many whole minutes are included in the total minutes. So all that to say, we want 1 decimal place, but then we want to change something. So if minutes is a 1-digit number, if mins 1 is equal to a decimal place, then I just want mins to equal to mins.substring 0 to 1. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to find where the decimal place is, and I just want the numbers in front of that decimal place. Okay, like I said, if we had like 0.9 these amount of minutes, I just want this to tell me that it's 0 minutes. And then this bit I can convert into seconds later on. And what we're going to return is mins plus a colon and then the seconds. Okay, let's see how this works. So coming back to our text widget down here, we can just return this and give it our time spent. And let's save this. Cool, yeah, so you can see that kind of formatting, and I can just see already, I want to just do a little adjustment. If seconds is a 1-digit number, place a 0 in front of it. So just to make this look nice and digital, let's say if seconds.length is 1, then seconds is equal to, just pop a 0 in front of it. Okay, so you can see it's like in the seconds section, it's only got 1 0, but I want to change this so it looks more like a time. Hell yeah, let's try. Cool, so we're gonna go from 1, 2, 3, and let's see when it reaches 60 minutes. I just wanted to increment the minute section. Oh yeah, one thing, I just found a little bug because this number here, I want to just change it to any bigger number than 1, like 3 or 5. It was calculating and rounding a little bit too soon, so there was a little issue with the numbers, but this will fix it up. And so now the timer just goes smoothly. Now let's include that percent sign that I wanted. So coming down to the progress, I want to say this is equal to the percent. right? Like I want like a percentage of how much progress we've made. So we're gonna just create a little method up here to calculate the progress percentage. So let's say a double percent completed, and we're just going to return time spent divided by the time goal. And the problem with time goal is this is a integer in minutes, right? So let's just multiply by 60. Okay, so this is in seconds and this is also in seconds. And so now we can just return this percentage at the end here. Let's say toString as fixed 0%. Oh, sorry, 0 decimal places. That's what I mean. And also at the end of this, let's add in the actual percent button so it looks nice. Cool, there it is. And maybe put some space around that equal button. Cool, and let's see if this works, right? Oh, it looks like our percentage isn't changing, and that's because I'm an idiot. In our percent completed, this will just give us a 0 point something. So let's just come over here, and if I just times this by 100, this should work. Yep, there we go. You can see it's now 1% and 2%. And so the reason why I want the percentage there, well, first of all, it's for the user to know when they use this app, how much of the habit they've completed. But just in terms of the UI, remember we had this progress circle, and we can actually give it a percentage, right? Which is perfect because we can just say, let's give it the percent completed. And so let's just save this. And this percent should go up, but also we should have a little bar going around here. And you can see already there's that little red bar coming around. And just to speed things up, I'm just going to come back here, right? And just say, I'm just going to say 1 minute. And you guys can see, just going from 0 to 1 minute, this should fill up. And some customizations I want to make is this color, like the progress color. It looks like it's red by default, but let's just do some fancy things here. So I don't want it to be red all the way around, right? Let's say, this percent completed, if it's greater than 50%, then let's give it green. Otherwise, give it red. Okay, so it's going to start off as red, and after 50%, hopefully it turns green. And if this works, then let's maybe add in an orange as well. %, and then now we're green. Hell yeah. Which means let's add in an orange as well while we're here. So, all right, your percentage, is it greater than 50%? Then we're going to do this. But even inside here, let's do another check. Percent completed, is it greater than 0.75? Yes. If it is, then do green. If not, let's do orange. All right, let's check this one last time. All right, we're at 30 and it should turn orange. And then hopefully after 75%, it'll turn green. And so now we can just play all of these timers, and the colors should correspond nicely. So we're about to reach 75% and it turns green. Hell yeah. And I think if we fill up the circle, we might get an error because this percent has to be between 0 and 1. Let's just see if an error occurs. Yep, there we go. So let's just fix this error. We can just say this percent, right? If it's greater, or let's just say if it's less than 1, then we're just going to return the percentage. Otherwise, we're going to return 1. Okay, so let's just test this out again. Basically what this is saying is if it's less than 100%, just display the current percentage. But if it's not less than 100%, then just give it 100%. Cool, and we're about to reach 100%. Hopefully we don't get an error and everything just continues on. Yay, so it's just a full circle and we can go beyond the goal time if we like. But yeah, this will take care of that error. So we've made some pretty good progress on our app, I reckon. We created the UI for it, and just then we completed the general functionality of this habit tracker app. Now, the natural next consideration for us to make is to think about how you want to store the data. So for example, right, like we have this habit tracker going, and if the user kills the app and restarts it, we want the information to still be there, right? So if I like restart this, then it'll just come back to the initial state of the app. There's a few ways or a few solutions for you to think about. So you could hook it up with, say, Firebase and use like an online solution, right? Like store your information on the internet. Or lately I've been looking at some offline solutions, whether that's SQL or Hive, just to make sure the app works in an offline manner. So for me personally, I actually want to use this app for myself. So I might use a mixture of both, like a little bit of Hive to store the data locally. And then maybe, once a day, at the end of the day, it can hook up to Firebase and update the information so that I have it stored somewhere. But that's going to be up to the individual developer and your preference on how you want to store the data. But as far as this habit tracker goes in terms of the UI and the functionality, I hope you followed it along and I hope it was pretty easy to understand. So play around with it and let me know if you have any issues. But other than that, thanks for watching and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace!